In a world of polished chrome and silent, electric ambition, Annalise Croft commanded an empire from a throne of glass and steel. Her office, 50 stories above the city, was a sterile temple to efficiency, where the only warmth came from the glow of stock tickers. Her hands, always perfectly manicured, signed deals that shifted global markets, but they had never held a wrench, never felt the honest grit of creation. She saw the world as a system to be optimized, people as assets or liabilities. Miles away, in a small garage that smelled of oil and metal and honest labor, Liam Vance saw the world differently. He saw it as a collection of beautiful, intricate machines, each with its own rhythm, its own soul. His hands, permanently marked with the ghosts of grease and grime, could diagnose an engine's ailment by its sound alone. They could fix anything, from a sputtering sedan to the broken heart of his 7-year-old daughter, Mia, whose bright crayon drawings were taped over the tool chests, vibrant splashes of color in his monochrome life. He was a single father, a mechanic, a man whose quiet competence was his only currency in a world that had long forgotten him. He was content, for in Mia's laughter, he had found a wealth Annalise's billions could never buy. But the gears of fate were turning, aligning these two disparate worlds for a collision that would shatter one and rebuild them both. The inciting incident arrived with the scent of champagne and quiet desperation. Liam was working security at the Croft Dynamics annual gala, a favor for a friend, when the centerpiece of the evening, a revolutionary prototype engine, sputtered, coughed black smoke, and died on its display platform. A wave of panic rippled through the glittering crowd. For Annalise, it was a public humiliation. As her engineers swarmed the dead machine, another, more personal disaster approached. Marcus Thorne, her ex-fiancé and ruthless corporate rival, was gliding toward her, a predatory smile on his face. "Having some trouble, Annalise?" Marcus purred, his eyes gleaming with schadenfreude. "Perhaps your company is as hollow as your promises." Cornered, her composure cracking, Annalise's gaze darted around, landing on the calmest face in the room. It was Liam, standing stoically by the wall. Most celebrated minds pronounced the prototype a catastrophic failure. "The microcompressor has seized. The core is fried. It's a complete write-off," her chief designer declared, wiping sweat from his brow. The pronouncement was a death knell for her company's stock and her reputation. As the murmurs of the crowd grew, a strange impulse seized Annalise. She looked from her defeated, 6-figure salaried team to the quiet man still standing beside her, the man whose solid presence had been her only anchor. "You!" she said, her voice ringing with a challenge born of desperation. She pointed at Liam. "You look like you know your way around an engine. You think you can do better?" A hush fell. Marcus laughed aloud, but Liam simply stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the silent, smoking machine. He didn't see a failure, he saw a puzzle. He circled the prototype, his eyes scanning its complex architecture, his head tilted as if listening for a secret. His hands, those grease-stained instruments of genius, hovered over the casing, feeling for a vibration that wasn't there. He asked for a single tool, a precision stethoscope. Ignoring the snickers, he placed the metal disc against the engine block, closing his eyes. He wasn't just listening, he was communing with the machine. The room held its breath. Seconds stretched into a minute. "There," he said softly, his voice cutting through the silence. He pointed to a seemingly insignificant junction. "There's a hairline fracture in the tertiary coolant feed. It's starving the core. It's not seized, it's suffocating." Annalise's chief engineer scoffed. "Impossible. We ran a full diagnostic." "Your diagnostic looks for what's broken," Liam replied, his eyes still on the engine. "It doesn't look for what's about to break." He then did something extraordinary. Without schematics, he reached into the guts of the machine, his fingers deftly bypassing the main conduits. He rerouted a tiny bypass valve with a twist and a click, a move of such elegant simplicity that it looked like a magic trick. He stood back. "Try it now." A nervous engineer hit the ignition sequence. A low hum began, growing into a steady, powerful purr. The prototype's lights flared to life. A small, independent garage. But before that, he was Dr. Liam Vance, the lead propulsion architect at the Ares Aerospace Consortium. He was a legend, a prodigy who had redesigned the ion drives that made deep space travel viable. He was the man who had solved the Vance equation, a feat that had stumped physicists for decades. Then, 5 years ago, he had vanished. The file noted a personal tragedy, the sudden death of his wife, a fellow scientist, followed by his abrupt resignation over an ethical dispute concerning a project. He had walked away from a world that revered him, trading fame and fortune for a quiet life fixing transmissions and raising his daughter. Annalise felt a tremor of something she hadn't experienced in years: awe. This man hadn't just fixed her engine. He had built the modern equivalent of starships, and he had given it all up for a principle, for his child. The thought was so foreign to her own relentless ambition that it left her breathless. Driven by a compulsion she didn't understand, she went to his garage that afternoon. The opulence of her car was an intrusion in the humble space. She found him under a vintage car, his daughter Mia sitting on a stool beside him, carefully coloring. Annalise stood awkwardly, a titan of industry suddenly feeling like an intruder. Mia looked up, her eyes wide and curious. She shyly approached and held up her drawing. It was a picture of a rocket soaring through a starry sky. Below it were 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Me, and a third, wearing a shiny dress, labeled The Pretty Lady. Annalise's throat tightened. She knelt, accepting the drawing as if it were a priceless artifact. A profound, aching loneliness echoed through the empty chambers of her heart. At that exact moment, her phone buzzed with a frantic security alert. It was a Level 1 breach, a hostile infiltration of Croft Dynamics' central server. Her mind immediately went to Marcus. This was his style: ruthless, devastating. As panic began to set in, she looked up from the child's drawing to the man emerging from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag. She no longer saw a mechanic. She saw the architect of starships, the one man whose mind might be able to, immediately dubbed the fishbowl. Her top cybersecurity experts spoke in a language of firewalls and encryption keys. Liam spoke of pressure points and structural integrity. A data network is just an engine, he told a skeptical Annalise. It has flows, choke points, and points of failure. Marcus didn't just break in. He found a flaw in the design. He ignored their complex diagnostics and instead mapped the entire data flow onto a whiteboard, drawing it like a schematic for a propulsion system. His mind moved at a speed that left everyone else behind. He found the entry point, a cleverly disguised back door in a legacy software patch, but just as they were about to trace its origin, the trail went cold. The digital pathway dissolved into nothing. Marcus had anticipated them. It was a demoralizing setback. Annalise paced her office, fury and fear warring within her. "He's going to ruin me," she whispered. Liam, however, was calm. He stared at the whiteboard, at the ghost of the erased pathway. "He's good," Liam admitted, a flicker of professional respect in his voice. "He built a clean getaway. But every engine, no matter how perfect, has a unique resonance, a vibration. He left a signature. We just have to learn how to listen for it." The attack escalated. Marcus, using the data he'd stolen, began a targeted media leak, painting Annalise as an incompetent leader whose company was technologically vulnerable. The board of directors, spooked by the plummeting stock, called an emergency meeting in 48 hours to vote on her removal as CEO. The clock was ticking. For 2 days, Liam barely slept, living on black coffee and an unyielding focus. Annalise found herself watching him, amazed by his stamina, his utter lack of panic. He wasn't just working, he was creating, his mind weaving through petabytes of data as if it were a tangible substance. Then, late on the final night, he found it. It wasn't a trail, it was something far more sinister. "He didn't just steal the data," Liam said, his voice grim as he beckoned Annalise to the screen. "He left a parting gift, a logic bomb. He pointed to a section of code buried deep within their core operating system. It was a masterpiece of destructive programming without triggering it, effectively creating an undeniable digital fingerprint and tracing it back to its source. It was a move no cybersecurity expert would have ever conceived of. It was the work of a true genius. They had the evidence, the smoking gun. The code's signature was an irrefutable link to a server bank owned by a shell corporation that led directly to Thorn Industries. Marcus hadn't just planned to oust Annalise. He intended to scorch the earth, buy the company's ashes for nothing, and absorb its legacy into his own. The plan was no longer just about defense. It was about justice. Liam would not just be a consultant. He would be the one to present the findings at the board meeting. Annalise, a woman who had never trusted anyone with her fate, now placed the entirety of her life's work into the calloused hands of the man she had once dismissed. As they prepared, she looked at him, not as an employee or a savior, but as a partner. "Thank you," she said, the words carrying the weight of her entire transformation. The boardroom was a coliseum, and Annalise felt like a gladiator about to be fed to the lions. The air was thick with betrayal and ambition. Marcus Thorne sat at the far end of the table, the picture of faux sympathy, his victory all but assured. Annalise began the meeting, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Before the board casts its vote," she announced, "I would like to introduce a special consultant who has been analyzing our recent security challenges, Mr. Liam Vance." All eyes turned as Liam, dressed in a simple, well-fitted suit that couldn't quite hide the quiet power in his frame, walked to the front of the room. A murmur went through the board members. This was the mechanic from the gala? Marcus chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Liam ignored him. He didn't use a complex slideshow. He used analogies. "Your company's data network is like a high-performance engine," he began, his voice calm and clear. "And for the last week, someone has been pouring sand in the oil." He explained the data breach, the smear campaign, and then he projected the logic bomb's code onto the main screen. He showed them the trigger, timed to their very meeting. Then, he overlaid his own diagnostic program. On the screen, a shimmering wave pattern isolated disarmed. All logs of its signature and origin have been transferred to a secure third-party server, with copies sent to the SEC and federal authorities. The game was over. Marcus Thorne was not just defeated, he was annihilated, his treachery exposed in the most public and undeniable way possible. In the aftermath, the story became legend. The world was captivated by the tale of the humble single father, the hidden genius who had emerged from obscurity to save a titan of industry. Liam was inundated with offers, but he ignored them all. The only one that mattered came from Annalise. In front of her reinstated and deeply humbled board, she formally offered him the position of Chief Technology Officer, complete with a staggering salary and stock options. "Your vision is what this company needs," she said, her gratitude and admiration clear. Liam looked at Annalise, the woman he had come to see not as a CEO, but as a person who had lost her way and was fighting to find it again. He thought of Mia, of his quiet garage, of the life he had so carefully built. "I can't be your CTO," he said, and her face fell. "But," he continued, "I will lead a new research and development division. We'll call it the Vance Skunk Works. We'll build the future, but on our own terms. No compromises. And my most important job title will always be Mia's dad. I'm home by 6 every night." Annalise smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that transformed her face. "Deal," she said without a moment's hesitation. The final scene was not in a boardroom or a lab. It was at a local park on a sunny afternoon. Liam was pushing Mia on a swing, her laughter pealing through the air. Annalise stood beside him, not in a power suit, but in simple jeans and a sweater. As the swing reached its apex, her hand found his, her smooth, manicured fingers lacing through his strong, calloused ones. They fit together perfectly. The broken systems, a company, a heart, a family, were being repaired. Not by a genius, but by a good man. Have you ever been underestimated, judged by your appearance rather than your character? Have you ever felt that your true worth was a secret no one could see? Liam's story reminds us that integrity is the most powerful